Learning all of the ins and outs when it comes to stretching in the gym will allow you to boost your fitness results and get the most out of your exercise routine. So today's video podcast, we're going to dive in to everything you need to know about stretching. We're going to talk about dynamic versus static stretching, if stretching can really help with soreness, and also some potential dangers of stretching as well. So make sure you stay all the way until the end of the video, because we got some really good information for you to set you up on your fitness journey. So go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, as we help individuals of all abilities improve their overall health and knowledge of the gym. And to start this discussion of stretching, what I wanted to dive into is a common question that I often get asked, and that is simply, should you stretch before your workout or after your workout? Okay, so this is really important stuff because it could really make or break the efficiency of your workout. So stretching in itself isn't necessary before or after workouts, okay? That's just something I want to say kind of right off the bat. People will think that they need to be doing stretching. Well, here's the deal, you don't. It may be a decent idea though to add a certain type of stretching, which we'll discuss in a second. So static stretching in particular before working out can be especially bad, because this can decrease the overall performance of the given muscle. So generally a warm-up and a cool-down to some degree is recommended. So the cool-down might be a good place to actually have some static stretching, and the warm-up is more of a general warm-up, and we'll kind of talk about that too. But certain types of stretching can be applied or should be applied before and after your workout if you have time. So usually when I talk about a warm-up, this consists of what we call dynamic stretching. And dynamic stretching is basically moving your joints through a very large range of motion and through a lot of different, sometimes funky looking exercises. So an example of a dynamic stretch might be a bodyweight lunge, where then you are reaching up to the sky and turning to the side. So if you think about it, you're working your legs, you're working your arms, you're working your core, you're working every single component of your body essentially, but it's very light, it's very passive, and it's technically not really a stretch, but that is what we call dynamic stretches. So this would be a good thing to implement in your warm-up. On top of that, you could also do something like some light jogging, maybe even some light walking. If you aren't fully up to doing jogging yet, that's totally okay. And maybe you also in your warm-up are going to practice the movements that you would normally do in your workout. So for example, maybe you are getting ready to do some squats in your workout routine. If that is the case, maybe you're going to do some really light bodyweight squats. Maybe you're going to do some really light bodyweight squat holds. Maybe you're going to do a kettlebell goblet squat hold. All of these are different variations that are warm-ups to help practice the movement. When it comes to a cool down, this is usually where I would recommend somebody to bring in that static stretching. Okay, so this is what we would normally think of as the stereotypical stretching, where we are just sitting and holding a joint in a specific position. And usually that is not going to kind of decrease that performance of a given muscle like I talked about earlier. So it's really great to add at the end of the workout when you are essentially done challenging your muscle, done really worried about that overall performance. And it's a really good way to actually lower your heart rate too. That's another thing I forgot to mention. When you're talking about a warm-up, you want your heart rate to get elevated slightly to get blood flow through the entire body. And when you're doing static stretching, if you do that before a workout, you're basically doing the complete opposite of getting blood flow through the entire body. On top of doing some static stretching after your workout, I would highly recommend to add in some walking or some light cardio as well. That can also give you a good bang for your buck in calming yourself down, calming your heart rate down, and also just making the end of your workout pretty chill, because you want the end of the workout to be a time for you to decompress, to wind down, and ultimately to help you start to move into that recovery, because the recovery aspect of workout routines is where you actually build the muscle and adapt. So some best practices and what I would recommend for a lot of individuals, because I know a lot of us are short on time, is to practice doing the movements itself and maybe some light cardio in your warm-up routine. Okay, so for example, if you're short on time and you are doing a bench press workout, for example, you're doing some bench press, maybe you're doing some other upper body exercises. Okay, great. So what I would recommend to do then is maybe do 3 sets of just the bar, 3 sets of 10 of just the bar as a way to practice the movement and warm up the joint. Maybe you can do 3 sets of 10 of push-ups before. So it's kind of the same type of movement, but it's a different movement. It's the same movement pattern, I should say, but it's a different movement. Still very similar to the bench press though. On top of something along those lines, some light cardio would go a really long way. So maybe you could do some push-ups, just jog in place for a minute, maybe jog around the block, depending on where you're doing this. Just do some light skipping rope, and then just do a few more sets of that. That's going to be, for a lot of people, probably the best use of time and the best bang for your buck. Now, if you have more time, God bless you. Hopefully you do have more time to work out. And if you don't have more time, maybe try to find some more time to work out. You will not be disappointed. So when it comes to having more time, a full dynamic stretching routine where you are doing all those exercises we talked about earlier, you can look up on YouTube, full dynamic stretching routine for beginners. I should probably make one. That'd be a good video idea. I will get around to that at some point, I'm sure. But other channels will spread the wealth here. Probably have some good ideas too. I know I've used some light cardio on top of that. Light cardio before any workout is going to be a good idea. And practicing the movement. So the only different thing we added here, if you have more time, is to just get a little bit more of a full dynamic stretching routine, because this will just mobilize your joints a little more. This will increase blood flow through the entire body, versus sometimes when you're just practicing the movements, it's a little localized in the area that's getting warmed up. So instead of just warming up that one specific area, more time, you can do that full dynamic stretching routine, and it's going to allow you to ultimately warm up your entire body. So you might feel a little bit more better to get into that workout routine. So if you learned something new from that section and you're finding value from this, please give this video a like. It greatly helps the channel and helps out others of all abilities improve their fitness and health. So another thing that I often get asked is, what in the world is the difference between dynamic and static stretching? I've heard that I should be stretching before a workout. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Should you? And if you should, what type of stretching should you do? Should you do dynamic or static stretching? So let's dive into this. So static stretching, in its essence, is holding a joint in a fixed range of motion for a long period of time. Now, when I say long period of time, I don't mean you're holding this thing for ages. I mean you're holding it roughly for probably 30 to 60 seconds, okay? So long is obviously a very subjective term, but longer than no time, I should say. So holding a joint in a fixed range of motion. So what does that mean? So basically, let's say I'm stretching my fingers here. If I take my index finger here and pull it back into position, I'm holding it in that position, in that stretch position as the joint, and that's a static stretch. So I'm just literally holding the joint in a position. If I let go, it's going to kind of spring back into that position, as you can see there. So static stretching can be applied to joints throughout the entire body, not just your fingers. That's obviously just what I was showing you so you could get kind of a idea of it. But the thing about static stretching that I need you to pay attention to and need you to realize is that doing this type of stretching before certain workouts can actually hinder your muscular performance. So let's break that down a little bit. So when it comes to static stretching, a lot of people don't realize that if you do this type of stretching before a workout, it can reduce the muscle's ability to produce power and speed. So kind of these athletic components where we're trying to move a weight fast and quick. Maybe we are about to play a pickup game of basketball with our friends and we need to be obviously moving quickly. Static stretching, maybe it's with your legs, maybe it's with your arms, where you're simply holding a joint in that position before these types of activities will literally shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to performance. I wouldn't say it's necessarily dangerous, like you're not really going to hurt yourself, but you are going to be leaving some performance in your muscle on the table. So these are the best to do after a workout or maybe after a game where you're just trying to cool down and let the muscle relax a little bit. The good thing about this, though, that I should say, is that this won't really affect muscular growth. And actually, there are some interesting studies done where people stretch in between sets of a muscle building workout, and they actually show slightly increased muscle in a few studies. Obviously, this can be probably disproven in some, but there is some promising results that stretching in between sets, or maybe even stretching before a workout, might actually help to improve muscle size. So it's a really interesting thing where maybe if you want bigger muscles but you don't want them to be stronger, you could stretch before a workout. I don't know, it'd be something to try. I don't know why you would want that though. You're kind of building a useless muscle if you ask me. So let's talk about what you should probably and ideally do before a workout instead of doing those static stretches. So dynamic stretching is usually what we recommend to do before a workout. And when I say dynamic stretching, just right off the bat, it's not really stretching, okay? So it has stretching in the name. It's not really stretching though. It's just basically moving a joint through a full range of motion with absolutely no load. So this can involve a series of different exercises all kind of combined together in a certain routine. And with this, you can get really creative. So maybe you're going to kind of mimic some of your normal strength movements that you do in a workout routine. So let's say you're doing squats, for example, and you want to do a static warm-up for a squat. Now, when you are doing a static warm-up, or excuse me, a dynamic warm-up, static stretching's after. A dynamic warm-up for a squat, apologies for that. Maybe you're going to do a squat with your body weight. And then once you come out of that squat, you're going to do a reach to the sky with your hands. So you're squatting and then reaching up, squatting, reaching up. So you're essentially doing a squat with a overhead press with no load. Maybe you're going to do the same movement, but do a squat with a twist and a reach. So squat with a twist and a reach behind you. And that would be considered another type of dynamic stretching. So very slowly, very controlled in manner, you are doing very similar movements to what you do in a workout. basically with no load and large ranges of motion, trying to move your entire body through this position. So the interesting and kind of neat thing, I suppose, about dynamic stretching is that you can also hold a static stretch in these movements to some degree. So for example, let's say you are doing the squat we just talked about, where you're doing a squat with a reach to the sky. A way you can make this into a somewhat static stretch is maybe you're doing a squat hold for a second at the bottom. So you're kind of passively holding that position, and then you move into that reach to the sky. So it's still fairly dynamic, but you can get a little more, I should say, stretching work by holding those positions as well. And these are the best to do before workouts. These will greatly improve the muscle's ability to be strong, have proper power, and if you are running and doing something where you need to be fast, it's going to help you with that as well. So as we've discussed here, static stretching is the best to do after a workout, and this dynamic stretching is the best to do before a workout. If you do one before a workout, let's say you flip this and you're like, is all my progress going to be lost? No, we're just talking about making the best out of your time in the gym and ultimately helping you become the fittest version of yourself. And that's the way to do it. Static stretching after, dynamic before. Like the video if you learned something new, gain some value from it. And we can also talk about stretching duration. So you might have been told by people that you should be holding a stretch for just maybe 10 seconds. Or maybe you don't even need to hold it at all. You just kind of reach down, you just hold it and let go. Hold it and let go. That's enough for a stretch, right? Well, here's the deal. When talking about how long you need to be stretching for, static stretching generally, we recommend about 3 sets of 30 to 60 seconds. And what I should say for this too is if you are able to dedicate 3 sets of static stretching after a workout, I would maybe recommend doing the 30 seconds of a time lot, so do 3 sets of 30 seconds. If you are strapped for time, I would try to do 60 seconds, but maybe one time, okay? So just one set of 60 seconds if you are trying to get those static stretches in. Dynamic stretching, this is moving a joint through a full range of motion, basically moving through a lot of different ranges of motion with maybe a squat hold where you reach up to the sky. There's a lot of good dynamic stretching videos on YouTube. This is probably going to be about 5 to 10 minutes in total. This should not take that long of a time. And just generally speaking, when we are talking about stretching in general, stretching should not take up a large amount of time in essence, okay? Most of your mobility gains or what you deem you want to get from stretching will be done by practicing the movements for that specific mobility. So let's think about squatting. I want to get a deeper squat. So I'm going to spend 10 minutes stretching out my legs so they can get into that deep squat position. This may help a little bit, and I'm not saying it wouldn't, but what you would be better off doing is practicing holding a deeper squat hold position, just practicing squatting in general. This obviously is going to be a little different on your rest day versus your active day, versus a active rest day, I should say. So if you are doing a rest day and an active rest day, you can honestly stretch as much as you want. Don't really worry about having any issues with that where you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to be wasting time. I'm talking about stretching, not taking a large amount of time if you are having an actual workout day. So if you're going in for a 1 hour workout in the gym, it should not take more than like 5 minutes after your workout to do some static stretching, or 5 minutes before to do some dynamic stretching. It should not use that much time. Your time is best served practicing the movements in a light load and just doing more general warm-up, maybe like a light walk. So when it comes to stretching for length, don't overthink it. A little bit goes a long way. Go ahead and drop a like if you learned something new, and also comment down below and let me know, how much do you stretch for and how often do you stretch? I'd be very curious to know. So when it comes to stretching in your workout routines, a lot of people will ask me, can I stretch on rest days? So when it comes to rest days, let's think about this. A rest day is something where we want to have restorative activities that are light and allow you to feel like you did something, but overall not work that much, okay? So we don't want it to ultimately kill us, so much so that when we are moving into the subsequent days of exercise, that we can't even focus on it. So the rest day should really be not that much going on, okay? So stretching, when we consider kind of what stretching is, it's actually great for rest days. So when I'm doing stretching on rest days, and I will preface, I don't actually stretch very often. When I'm doing my workouts, I do a lot of kind of mobility and weighted stretching type exercises. So my mobility is pretty decent. I don't feel the need to stretch, but if you did want to stretch, what I would recommend is to try to encompass your full entire body, so you can become holistically mobile. And you can also, on top of doing stretching, when you have your rest days, consider doing some other light activities as well. So maybe this is some light cardio, maybe this is doing some house chores, for example, so some gardening, or maybe you even, let's just say you need to fold a bunch of laundry, or you have a bunch of boxes to move. These are all forms of light physical activity that can actually build upon each other and ultimately give you a little bit of light, gentle movement on those rest days. So if you have a dog as well, you might be lucky, because a good rest day activity is taking your dog out for a walk. Again, these are all things that should be restorative, light, and allow you to feel like you did something, but not much. So like a light sweat at best. The rest day is meant to recover. It is meant to recover from the workout you did the day before. And if you allow that recovery to take place and that rest day to do its job, you will become stronger and more fitter in subsequent workouts. So it's unfortunate, because a lot of people will ruin their progress because they do too much on their rest days, when in raw reality, that's the time where you build some fitness and strength. So at the end of the day, though, remember, there is no requirement to stretch. If you are somebody who is very flexible already, and you want to become stronger, you might actually benefit from not stretching as much. Because some people who are too flexible can actually kind of hinder their overall strength potential. But if you do want to stretch, feel free. It is totally your call at the end. So go ahead, drop a like if that gave you some value. And another thing that we can consider when looking at stretching, and honestly something that a lot of people get confused about, is stretching and warm-up exercises. So many people will come up to me and be like, yeah, I just did some light stretches before my squats, I'm good to go. And I asked them, did you practice doing any bodyweight squats at all? Well, no. Okay, well, there is a bit of an issue here. So let's talk about the difference between warm-up and stretching exercises and what's going to be best for you. So warm-up exercises by far are going to give you the most bang for your buck. And stretching should never ideally replace these warm-up exercises. So the warm-up exercises are usually going to be very specific to the movement you are actually doing. So if you are doing squats, for example, a warm-up exercise for a squat, and maybe you're doing push-ups too. We'll just say you're doing squats and push-ups. So your workout's going to consist of squats and push-ups. So maybe for your warm-up, you're going to be trying to prime that specific movement. So ideally, we should be doing some type of squat. But maybe we don't want to do full squats yet. So we're just going to do squat holds where we sit into the bottom position of a squat as long as we can and then move on to our next warm-up exercise, which is, of course, the light dumbbell press. So a light dumbbell press, kind of on the flip side of this, is then going to work your shoulders. So if we're doing push-ups, we need to work our shoulders, triceps, etc. A light dumbbell press is going to do that exact same thing, and we're saying light as in very light, just to get some blood flow through the joints and keep us good to go. Overall, that in itself is a simple warm-up routine. We didn't do any stretching. We didn't do any, exercise where we're just holding it, just moving like that. We did some specific warm-ups that are going to help us directly with the movements we're working on. So it helps to get that area ready for the workout. Stretching, and usually what is done before certain workouts, is static stretching. And this is a big no-no, as this will decrease your strength potential, decrease your power potential, and decrease your overall speed in a muscle. So this is like simply holding a position like this, just holding a arm position, 1,000, 2, 1,000, boom, good to go. You get the concept. Holding a position like that can really decrease your performance before a workout. Dynamic stretching, on the other hand, could be a warm-up, and this isn't quite as much as a stretching. It would be very similar to maybe that squat and light dumbbell press exercise, but the difference between dynamic stretching is usually there's going to be zero load at all, and a lot of these movements when we do dynamic stretches are something we don't typically do in a workout. So some examples of static stretching may be a lunge with a twist to the sky. Not a lot of us will load that as a movement, load that as an exercise, but doing that exact movement worked a large amount of joints in your body. And it will allow you to kind of just mobilize your whole body. So doing that type of stretching before a workout technically could be a warm-up, but that static stretching, guys, we got to stay away from that at all costs. You're more pressed to do something like that at the end of a workout, okay? So stretching should never really replace warm-up exercises, and in fact, warm-up exercises should always take precedent versus stretching when it comes to the beginning of the workout especially. So if you learned something new from that and got some value, like this video and let me know down below if you currently stretch before workouts, do static stretching before workouts, and let me know if you plan on changing. I'm curious. I am definitely curious. So in addition to that, a lot of people think that stretching will cause soreness in a muscle. Or I should say, a lot of people think that stretching will help to prevent soreness in a muscle. So is this really the case? Well, soreness in a muscle usually happens for a few different things. When an exercise is novel or new, this usually increases soreness of a muscle after the workout. And usually this novel exercise actually is when somebody starts using a full or larger range of motion than they're used to on a given exercise. So for example, if they normally do bench press all the time, and then they start doing dumbbell bench press where they can get a good stretch at the bottom and a larger range of motion, this larger range of motion when you first do it is a novel way to challenge your body, and that full range of motion, that novel exercise usually increases soreness after a workout, okay? On top of that, a focused eccentric can actually increase soreness sometimes. So a exercise that has a bigger eccentric component to it, or basically the lengthening of a muscle. A lot of times this is a kind of lowering of a weight, or we can think about it with like running. So running, there's a large amount of eccentric load. Anytime you land your foot, you are absorbing that load. That's a huge amount of eccentric force going through one leg. Anytime there's a exercise routine with a large eccentric, that can also increase the overall soreness of a muscle. And also on top of that, of course, if you are just doing generally more volume than normal, this is also going to greatly increase the overall soreness until you are accustomed and used to doing those specific workouts, okay? So those are a few of the things that kind of combine and usually kind of work off of each other when it comes to soreness in a muscle. So does stretching really help with this? Well, stretching can't fully prevent soreness. As we talked about in all of these things, they're not really something that stretching can even touch for the most part. It might help alleviate some of the tightness after a workout, a tough workout, which could reduce some of the pain and soreness, but especially if you do it before a workout thinking this is going to prevent soreness, that won't happen. It might be able to prevent a little bit of soreness after, but even that, the soreness is usually just from your body needing to recover in general. So the stretching will help to a very tiny degree, not as much as what people think, okay? A better option is to try to have some more general movement, just maybe do some walking or some light squats, for example. Say your legs are sore, squat holds would be a good example. Maybe your shoulders are really tight and sore, so you're thinking of some shoulder exercises. You could do just some light, gentle arm rolls where you're going all the way up and down. You could do some band work with some bands, do some external rotations. Just getting some gentle blood flow through that area is basically going to help us clear out the metabolic waste from the workout and ultimately allow us to recover. So again, that soreness, the stretching won't really help too much because soreness happens from that novel exercise, the focus eccentric, or more volume than normal. So at the end of the day, your best bet is to just move a little bit more and get to bed, get some good protein in, and you'll be recovered and good to go. Sometimes we look for different things that we think are going to help tremendously, as in stretching, and it just doesn't give as much of a bang for buck as a lot of us hoped it would. So go ahead and drop a like if you learned something new from that section. And another thing that we can dive into, and something that a lot of people think, is that certain exercises need specific stretches to get better at them. Okay, so maybe you're like, I can't squat deep, and I know if I just do this one simple stretch, I'm going to be able to squat deeper almost instantly. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that indeed. So getting better mobility. When we talk about getting better mobility, usually doing exercises similar to the exercise versus doing stretches for the exercise. Doing the exercise is going to actually help you build mobility and become better at that specific exercise. Okay, so I know that's a lot of kind of redundancy and bouncing all over the place. So I hope to explain this a little bit better. But if you are trying to get better mobility at squats, if you want to get that deeper squat we just talked about, this is just an example, can be applied to any exercise. You'd be much better off, doing more squats versus doing a hamstring stretch, for example, or a quad stretch. You would be so much better off, better served, not only because you're building the movement pattern of a squat, but doing a squat in itself is more specific to the movement. And the more specific or the more closer you can get to mimicking the movement you are trying to get better mobility at, the better overall mobility you are going to get. So instead of doing a hamstring stretch, for example, to try to get better mobility for a squat, you would likely be better off doing maybe like an overhead squat hold in the bottom position with a barbell, as deep as you can, simply holding that as long as possible. Okay, it's way more specific to a normal squat, the specific joint angles, etc. Certain stretches can help exercises, and this is especially true if somebody is very untrained. So if they're very sedentary, haven't worked out in a long period of time, these gentle mobility exercises can sometimes give people a good boost in their overall mobility, just because their joints haven't moved that much at all. So this novel bit of stimulus is going to help them just get generally more flexible, I should say, but more mobile in general. But the reason why that type of stretching helps them in that case get more mobile isn't because of the stretching, it's just because they're moving more generally. They would have had the exact same benefit if they just started trying to practice and implement more squats. But for some people, getting their foot in the door with doing some gentle, light exercise and light stretches when you first begin are going to be a good idea for you. You probably will get to a point where you maybe don't need to do them after a while. For example, you might start off squatting and think like, oh, I just need to loosen up my hamstrings or loosen up my quads and do some gentle stretches to begin with. Over time, your squat mobility is going to improve just by practicing that movement, where you might not even need to do those anymore to get into that deep squat position, which is a super good thing. And you should be very proud of yourself if you do get to that point, because a lot of people never will, because they don't realize that the more specific you are in your stretches, I should say more specific you are in your mobility, the better mobility you are going to get for that movement in itself. Let's use another example. Let's say you are not the best at pushing an object overhead, doing overhead press. Your shoulder mobility is not as good. So there are some exercises, like stretching exercises, that will help you, put your arm back behind your head a little bit better. But what's going to help you improve your mobility the most is potentially just doing the movement itself without literally any weight. Or maybe you're going to hold from a bar. So it's kind of a weighted stretch for your lats where you are just holding yourself in this overhead position. Maybe you're just going to straight up hold a barbell overhead in that exact position. That is going to be a lot more helpful if you are doing that than just doing those static stretching. If you do those in addition to the static stretching, you probably will boost your overall mobility results a little bit quicker. But if you're talking about for time's sake, definitely do stuff more specific to your actual movement. Again, it helps get mobility proper and precise in those specific joint angles, which is exactly what we were trying to do to boost mobility in your exercises. So like the video if that gave you some good value, and you're going to want to stay tuned for this next one, because overstretching, this is going to be something that you want to be very careful of, very aware of, and yeah, you don't want to overstretch. And let's talk about why. So overstretching in itself can lead to sprains or strains. So a strain is an overstretching of a tendon, and a tendon is basically connective tissue that attaches the muscle on your body to the bone on your body, okay? A sprain is an overstretching of a ligament, and a ligament is a piece of connective tissue that attaches bone to bone on your body, okay? So if you overstretch a muscle, this is usually where tendon ruptures and tears actually occur, or ligament tears occur, is because of overstretching to a very exaggerated degree. So if you have a sprained ankle and it's turning to the side, if you think about it, that is getting stretched so deeply and so quickly that a lot of times those ligaments get overstretched and can't handle it. So this is when it comes to like acute injury, and injuries often will happen through this. But stretching, actually like static stretching, especially if you are somebody who is already super mobile, this can be deleterious simply because that stretching can increase the risk of this overstretching happening. So if you're already flexible and you're stretching even more, and then you come into a position where that stretch happens, it could come to a point where unfortunately you might lead to more injuries. So we need our joint to be mobile, we need it to be flexible, but not too flexible. We also need it to be rigid and strong as well. So there's kind of this fine line and balancing act of keeping enough strength, but also flexibility at the same time. So some best practices to make sure you don't overstretch and don't hurt yourself is to stretch to a point of tolerable discomfort. So this is basically where you're reaching down, you're like, okay, it's a little tight, and then maybe going a little bit further. Holding that position for roughly 30 to 60 seconds, and you don't even need to do that many. You only need to do maybe 1 to 3 total sets of these stretching. It should be short, it should be very succinct. You can actually get pretty decent length through a static stretch through just 60 seconds of holding at one time. Stretching before workouts too, I will say it isn't dangerous. It isn't going to hurt yourself unless you are kind of overstretching, but doing any static stretching before a workout can actually decrease the performance of a muscle. So the strength performance, the overall power of it, the ability for it to produce speed and quickness, that is all going to get greatly diminished by stretching, doing static stretching before a workout. So just be careful when you're stretching. Do a little bit, it goes a very long way. And realize that more is not always better. And just like working out, you know, you need a certain amount to get the benefit. Just like stretching, you need a certain amount to get the benefit. After that, you could be predisposing yourself for potentially some injuries from becoming a little too bendy. So go ahead and drop the video a like if that has given you some good value and ideas on your stretching routine. And just be careful, make sure you don't overstretch. I believe in you and know you'll do the right thing. So one of the other things that people will often ask me about, and something that I actually used to be confused on too, is this difference between mobility and flexibility. So flexibility, and I'm going to try to break this down as easy as I can. Flexibility is usually something that I would consider as a passive movement, okay? Being flexible can help your mobility, but being mobile doesn't, I should say, require you to be fully flexible, okay? So you can also be somebody who is very flexible, but you might not have the best mobility. So mobility is a more active way at looking at a movement. And I'll give you a little bit of an example here, and hopefully this will clear things up and make it a little bit easier to decipher and understand. So let's say you're doing a knee to chest exercise. So you're sitting in a chair and you are bringing your knee up to your chest as high as you can. So to kind of assess your flexibility in this given exercise, you would grab the knee itself and gently assist it up to your chest, okay? How far it can go at that point will show you how flexible you are. So if you can't lift your knee too high up to your chest, you're not very flexible in that given position. You don't have the flexibility, I should say, to bring your knee all the way up to your chest. Mobility, on the other hand, would be doing the same movement, bringing the knee up to the chest, but without any assistance. So it combines the strength of the muscles at the joint and the flexibility. So if you are somebody who can pull your knee all the way up to your chest and you don't need to use it for any assistance, you have very, very good mobility and likely some really good flexibility. If you are somebody who can only bring your knee up to the chest with assistance, you likely have pretty good flexibility, but maybe so-so mobility. So if we're thinking about somebody who has pure strength, they're really, really good at lifting that knee in a strong setting. Say if there was like a huge heavy weight on your knee and you needed to lift it up, you'd be able to, but you might not be able to move that knee for a very long range of motion, okay? So you might only be able to move that knee up a couple inches, but that couple inches you're gonna be really, really strong at. So mobility kind of involves moving of the joint actively. Stretching is more passively. I'll give you one more example here. So we can use the ability to move your thumb, and I can't even do this very well, your thumb behind your hand as an exercise. So my flexibility for this is, decent. I don't know if this is even good, but that's with me assisting it. So flexibility, I'm assisting it, okay? That's one aspect. Mobility would be if I do the same exercise, but try to do it without holding on. You see my mobility, the ability to do it without that assistance, I can't do it quite as much. So mobility, active, flexibility, passive, very similar. You can be very flexible, but not mobile. Usually if you are mobile, you do have quite a bit of both. And usually that's what is what people are striving for, right? We don't want to be just flexible where we can just bend. We want to be able to be strong and flexible in very tough positions, okay? So like a deep squat, for example, the better your mobility is, the better you can get down there and be strong in those positions. So if you learned something new from that and got some value, go ahead and drop the video a like, explaining the differences between there pretty succinctly for you. And on top of that, go ahead and also consider giving the channel a subscribe, as we help individuals of all abilities improve their overall health and knowledge of the gym. And once you're doing that, I'm going to link another video right here, which is going to link another podcast I think you'd also enjoy. We did a full deep dive on the difference between cardio and weights and what you should do in your workout routine. So that's going to get linked right here. I'll also put it down in the pinned comments so you can check it out, but go ahead and check that out. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you in the next video. Be all strong.